Keep right to State Route 2A. Keep right to State Route 2A.
In their politicians and the political process now for many decades. We are
in half a mile. Turn left on South Street.
Uncharted waters. Record numbers of Australians no longer have confidence in the system. Record numbers of Australians now distrust the political process and the players in it. Just more recently, we've had the latest of a series of Royal Commissions of inquiry into various institutions, this time banking and the financial service.
In 1,000 feet, turn left.
And we learnt that we couldn't trust bankers. Now, there are many trustworthy bankers, in case there are any here.
Turn left on South Street.
Plainly, people were deeply concerned by what emerged. And you stop and think about this. When people are in relationships of trust, harmony and progress can be made. When it breaks down, harmony and progress are impaired and people flee for safety. If you don't feel safe with someone else, you'll look for the rule book and you'll look for policing and you'll look for protection. So that's a good thing we've had the Royal Commission of Inquiry. So
in 11.5 miles, you'll arrive at Bar Falls Dam.
We know what's been going on. It's a good thing we've got the 78 recommendations, new laws everywhere, new surveillance, new policing. But it's a tragedy that it was necessary in the first place. People have not been doing what they should have been doing without coercion. So now we've got a great big battle as to how to resolve these things. You see, the law-based approach. But, Jordan, you've said something quite different. In the midst of all of this, what you have said is that the redemption of the world is not political, it happens at the level of the individual. That's not what we hear in the media every night there's a new scandal. It's we need more rules, we need more policing, we need more surveillance, we need a different party in power. You're not saying that. You're saying it comes back to the individual.
Well, the first question is, do you want that? I mean, do you want a state with more regulatory power? Do you want a state with more surveillance? I mean, first of all, why would you think that that would be trustworthy when all the evidence suggests in the past that as the state expands its surveillance power, it actually becomes less trustworthy rather than more? And why would you might think, well, I certainly want someone looking into your affairs, but I don't want anybody looking into mine. Well, good luck with that, because, to the degree that I have elect someone to look into your affairs, they're bloody well going to be looking into mine as well. And that just doesn't strike me as a particularly positive development. Practically, because I don't believe it'll work. I don't think surveillance states do make people more honest. I think all the evidence is the opposite. And then I would say from the individual perspective, it's like, I believe that the fundamental, what we got fundamentally right in the West, because there was a number of things we got fundamentally right, even though we don't like to admit that anymore, is that the ultimate moral responsibility for the state relies on you. It relies on your moral integrity. And, it's not that hard to think that through. It's like, well, first of all, you have the right and the responsibility to vote. And we could say, well, that's not exactly given to you by the state. It's something that exists in some sense outside and before the state. It's part and parcel of your intrinsic value. Okay, so that's a decision that we've made in the West, that each person, regardless of their flaws, is characterized by a value, an intrinsic value that's so deep and so profound that the very regulation of the state itself rests on their shoulders. And that's really something. That's why you have the right to vote. And that's worth thinking about. The first question is, well, do you think that's a good idea or not? Do you believe that we are, in fact, sovereign individuals? And then, well, let's assume that you believe that we are. because the alternative is some sort of autocracy, right? It's some sort of tyranny. It's the parsing off of that sovereignty to a bureaucracy or to some arbitrary form of leadership. And maybe you can believe in that, and you'd like a strong leader, and fine. But you want to think that through, because if it's not that, then it's you. Well, then if it's you, and you have to make sure that the ship of state is sailing properly, then the first thing you might want to ask yourself is, what makes you think you're any more trustworthy than the people that you're despising or criticizing? I mean, if you are, well, more power to you, but it isn't self-evident that you are, and my suspicions are that it's not even self-evident to you that you are, because it's a very rare person that you come across. If you talk to them with any degree of seriousness, they're able to lay out a whole litany of ways they fall short of their own values, not values that other people are putting on them, certainly that as well, and they can name innumerable ways that not only are they not doing what they should be doing, so they're falling short of the mark in that way, but they're doing all sorts of things that they definitely shouldn't be doing, and they know it. It's like, well, we're going to put that right or not? And my sense is, I wrote a rule in my book, put your house in perfect order before you complain about the world, before you criticize the world. Well, what's the idea? It's like, well, you're the sovereign, man. If the ship of state is listing and sinking, that's you. That's your problem. It's your fault. You're not doing it right. You're not educated enough. You're not awake enough. You're not articulate enough. You don't know enough about history. You're not taking on enough responsibility. You're looking for other people to blame because it's convenient. And that's kind of understandable, because it's the dispersal of responsibility. Who wants all that responsibility? But there's a huge price to be paid for it. The first price that you pay for it is, well, there goes the adventure of your life. It's like you could get yourself together and be the bedrock of the state, right? That'd be hard. That'd call on everything that you have. That would be your adventure. You're going to pass that off to someone else, and then what do? You've got nothing left in your life but triviality. And you can't live. I don't believe that people can live ethically, trivially. That's why I think the pursuit of the idea that life is for happiness is wrong, because life is too difficult for that to be the case. Our lives are too profound, too characterized by suffering and malevolence. The world is too characterized by trouble at every level for happiness to be the proper solution. The solution is something like a heavy burden of ethical responsibility, the kind that sets the state straight. And then in that you find the purpose of your life. And so not only, if you want the external monitoring and the surveillance state, not only do you sacrifice your privacy and invite all that invasive attention and lose your impulsive freedom, you lose everything that's profound about your life, and someone takes it from you. They take your destiny from you. And that's no way to live. That's the tyranny that we've struggled against in the West successfully for, I would say, in one way or another for a number of thousands of years, and with a substantial amount of success.
To draw Dave into this, we met in LA a couple of years ago over breakfast. Dave, you're a great defender of culture too. Now, when we met, it was very interesting. You set out the reasons, in a way, for me to think, he's a card-carrying progressive. You told me where you came from and what you believed in, what you didn't, and then you said, and I'm a gay married man. And then you went on to say,
Approaching a railroad crossing.
and I thank God every day I live in Christian America. And I thought, that's a surprise turn in the conversation, and we had a fantastic breakfast talking about it. You're a defender of culture now, or of our cultural roots, at a time when the West seems to be its own worst enemy and doesn't believe in its cultural roots. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, of course. Well, first off, as you guys I'm sure know, Jordan and I just left the Sydney Opera House a few minutes ago, and we've done about 120 some odd shows where I've opened for Jordan, and it just struck me in the last 2 minutes that having to follow you is much less fun than having to go before you. That's easy. I'm usually just setting them up, and you're knocking them out of the park. But okay, I'll try. Well, just quickly on what Jordan said about the individual, because it links exactly to that. People ask me all the time in the Q&As and in our meet and greets, what is going on? Why is it that people are following this psychologist talking about lobsters all over the country? And actually, that question is what I believe is the answer. There has been a complete obliteration for young people to understand what being an individual is, what being a person that owns your own mind, that decides to get out there and live the life they're supposed to live, that doesn't want to take from somebody and give to somebody else or just take for themselves. And that has really been lost. And what's been amazing to me, as we've done now 20 some odd countries, is that the same things that you guys are thinking about in Sydney are the exact same things that people are thinking about in Toronto and Los Angeles and Stockholm and all over the country. And that's absolutely fascinating. So to your question, because I am an individual, that is what led me here. That's, I think, what led you to want to have breakfast with me in Los Angeles. That the differences, the immutable characteristics that we either have in common or separate us, whether it's sexuality or gender or skin color, are completely irrelevant. If we really want to be a society that is truly free, that truly respects each other, it makes no difference. I mean, I do, when I go to colleges, I'll usually just single out somebody in the crowd, and it's like, how sad would it be if I just looked at you and I was like, oh, well, you're a white guy, you look like you're in your early 20s, as if that would give me any inclination, that I would have any insight into what you think or how you should think, actually, is the better point. Because you should think whatever you think and hopefully be willing to have that exchange of ideas. So I'm very appreciative that I live in a Christian country, because the simple fact is, while the media will imply that, every day there's another story on how evil Christian white people are or something like that, and by the way, I see that spreading all over the world as well. I mean, there's a weird thing going on with the media where I thought it was really an American crumbling of the media, but now I see it all over the place. I live in the freest country in the history of the world, period. The United States in 2019 is the freest place in the history of the world. You can, with the most tiny exceptions on speech around, yelling fire in a crowded theater or a direct threat of violence, you can say whatever you want. And even being here in Australia, where you guys have it pretty good on speech, I can tell people are jealous of what America has. And certainly when we were in the UK, where they have all sorts of things, where, this YouTube creator, Count Dankula, had his dog, do the Nazi salute and got in all sorts of trouble. I mean, we won't have this forever, and that's very clear to me. And I would just add this, that Douglas Murray, who I'm sure you're familiar with in the UK, he's also gay, and he's a brilliant thinker. And I didn't even want to ask him anything about that, because it's completely irrelevant in a certain way. But the last question, when I had him on last time, I said to him, do you think your sexuality has a little something to do with your sensitivity about freedom? Because it might be you first. And he said that he thought his skin was a little thinner because of that. And so I do think that people that are on the outside, for whatever that is, it doesn't have to be sexuality, it could be obviously a myriad of different issues, I do think you become a little more sensitive to it. And for that reason, I'm incredibly, I'll go a step further. I am blessed that I live in the United States of America, and I'm a free man in the freest country ever, and I'm very appreciative of that.
You can see why we get on. Seriously. Can anyone push back against that? And yet half the time when you listen to the elites who have their hands on the levers of influence today, you would think we lived in cruel and oppressive cultures. Think of the four great revolutions, the American War of Independence and what came out of that. Think of the French Revolution. Think of the Russian Revolution. Think of the Maoist Revolution. Which one has produced a real understanding of the individual and secured their freedoms in a greater way? And we in Australia, of course, are unbelievably blessed, to use your word again, because we've inherited what's called a Westminster, the best of the British, our House of House of Representatives based on the House of Commons, Senate is closely modelled on yours, and it works unbelievably well. But you wouldn't think it, listening to the public commentary today. Now let's come to freedom. When you and I talked in Sydney back just before Easter last year, we had a great conversation, and to my enormous delight, I found that we had a friend in common, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. There you go, there's a photograph of him. Now, he doesn't look very happy. Well, there's a good reason for that. He would have been probably busted up physically and in all sorts of other ways as well when that photograph was taken. He was a hero in Russia in the Second World War. But after the war, he dared to disagree with the regime in Moscow, which was an unbelievably evil regime. And for the price, The price for disagreeing was that he ended up in the Gulag, in a prison. This is a remarkable book. He wrote about his experiences. This wasn't the only one. He was smuggled out to the West. There's no doubt that his writings shortened the life of that evil regime. But the bit that stayed with me, and which you referred to and have many times, you wrote a great essay on it over Christmas, I recommend it to you. It's published in the Times and then in the Australian, or you can Google it, was that this bloke recorded that one day he was lying in his cell, I'd imagine freezing cold, probably ill, incredibly unhappy in these circumstances. He hears the thumping of a guard down the rows, belting another prisoner up the screen. It dawned on me as I listened.
You'll arrive in half a mile.
To it, that the dividing line between good and evil actually doesn't lie between captor and captive. Can you imagine a prisoner in those circumstances saying, the bloke doing the beating is captive too, he's not free? Rather, he said the dividing line between good and evil lies somewhere across every human heart. It's not between man and woman. Tell that to some of the people in today's movements. It's not between Catholic and Baptist or man and woman. The dividing line between good and evil lies somewhere across every human heart. That was very profound for me in public life. And I was telling these friends on the way out that, for example, a point that came to me to be quite real as a young people in outback town of Walden, and a very, very came up to me.
You've arrived at your destination.